Hey guys, welcome back. It is now episode 14 of the Iron Sharpens Iron series. And what this series is all about, if you guys are new to it, is really just gathering the best brains, the best bodybuilders, the people in the industry, coaches that I feel do things the right way, present the right messages, and that you guys can learn from. And there's been great responses so far from the guests I've had on, and I don't expect anything else from this guest. I have Dr. Scott Stevenson on today. Dr. Scott has a PhD from University of Georgia. He is the author of Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach, and he's also a licensed acupuncturist. Dr. Scott has, let's see, I think you won the 2009 Mr. Arizona, correct?
I think that was the year, yeah.
Around there.
All right. Around there, yeah.
You have a handful of top 5 national placings, so you are a very, very well-rounded, well-versed, competitive bodybuilder. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. This is a chance, like we were just saying, it's a chance to reach new people, hopefully, and help people out. So
absolutely,
do this.
Full goal. So, and I was just telling Dr. Scott off camera. He asked me where I was, and I'm like, I'm actually in Tampa. I'm in your hometown. And the funny thing is I've seen him multiple times training and stuff, and I've just never really wanted to go up and interrupt his training. So never had a chance to actually meet him. So this is actually our first time meeting, and hopefully first of many. So.
Well, next time, come say hello, because as long as someone doesn't try to, you get me going, I have about 10 seconds, and if I keep talking, next thing I know, I'm 10 minutes into a conversation.
Yeah.
But after a workout, it's totally fine by me. We can grab some food sometime next time I see you.
I'd love it. Go get some training in, go grab some food. Absolutely. In all fairness, you were training legs when I saw you last, and I know how brutal leg days can be. So I was like, right, let him do his thing.
Yeah. But yeah, I kind of have that, like, don't fuck with me look on my face. I think it just kind of comes with the training, but sometimes it's intentional too.
I flip a switch. I'm a totally different person when I'm in there training. But so I brought Dr. Scott on today because I wanted to go through a few different things. We're going to be talking a lot about training during this video. We're going to be talking about old DC style training, Fortitude training, which you are obviously very famous for. And we're also going to touch upon different mechanisms of hypertrophy towards the end of it and stuff. But I really wanted to start with DC training. That's something that's very fascinating, something that people don't do anymore, but it was very popular back, 90s time, somewhere around there?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. The original Dante Trudell, we need to give credit where credit's due. Dante Trudell came on a board by a guy who was pretty well known at the time as his Animal was his online name. It was the Animal Kits board. And this is the origin. If people don't know this, he wanted to introduce these ideas that he'd had sort of formally, but a lot of people knew him on that board. So he just came up with another screen name, and he's just like, I'll just call myself, I don't know, dog crap, not knowing that would be the moniker he'd be stuck with,
right? Basically
for many, many years to come. So, and that was, I want to say, that was around 2000 maybe when that happened, roughly. Yeah. So, but he was developing the ideas in the late 90s for sure.
See, I'm 35. I was an Army combat medic. I graduated in 2007 from Indiana University, and then I came down with personal training in Tampa for a little while, and then joined the Army. So I grew up in that magazine era, like late 90s, early 2000s and stuff. And that's when that's obviously when I kind of first heard about it. Didn't really know anything about it, and didn't really even train that style at all back then. I was still training for baseball and basketball. I wasn't really bodybuilding per se, but definitely came across that. And obviously over the years, seeing more of your interviews, learning more of your stuff and your association with it back in the day and stuff, it's always really intrigued me. So what can you tell us about, like, somebody that doesn't know anything about dog crap training? What are the principles behind it?
So I need to make sure people know, like, Dusty Hanshaw, I think, is the guy that Dante sends people to officially. But I came to do something very, very similar to DC training. And when I actually found it, I'm like, okay, I'm doing like almost all these things aside from the rest pause cluster sets. Right. So it was already fit with my philosophy. And then after Dante came on Intense Muscle, which is intensemuscle.com. It's still the best place to go for kind of the basic DC stuff if you just want to read about it.
Right.
And I hooked him up with Dave Henry, and when I was training with Dave, And before that, I'd come across the DC, the Cycles for Pennies thread, which you can find archived all over the place. And you can find the principles there over 100 plus pages of back and forth.
Yeah.
And at one point, the previous person, Dante, had been sort of shuffling clients who had some issues. So I took over and was sort of the official DC trainer for several years. So people would inquire with Dante, and this is when he was getting pretty burnt out, but he would send me people. So that's sort of my background to sort of speak about DC training. I'm not Dante, of course, and you're not going to get him to do an interview. I'm almost certain of that.
Yeah, I didn't think he was going to. But
yeah, you're more likely to interview a true Martian, than Dante sometime soon. But the core of this is some of this will be just sort of my kind of alliteration of these notions too, my way of seeing them. But the core is progressive overload.
Right.
So, and progressive overload can kind of be seen as from two different sides, basically one of the same coin. One, you need to go in the gym with the intention to create a new and novel stimulus from the training. And the main way you're going to do that is by progressively overloading in terms of the amount of weight that you're using on the exercises for that day and or the reps. So the logbook is really your nemesis in the gym. And that, of course, then has to be supported by plenty of rest, recovery, sleep, and food. Right. DC's one of the main components is food is your main anabolic, so to speak. So Dante will talk about in the realm of super supplements that he's not big on people going overboard on that. Like even the top level people he's worked with, using food in the off season to grow from is the best way to make sure that happens. And then in a certain way, this is sort of a lay way to express it, but those gains are going to stick, so to speak, because they were had in maybe a slightly enhanced hormonal environment with, basic TRT or a little bit above that,
right?
Smaller amounts of growth hormone, nothing crazy in terms of what many people would do these days. So that's there. Those are gains that can be held onto for years and years thereafter, as opposed to someone who made their progress when they're in a pharmacologically enhanced state, so to speak. So the other side of the coin then of progressive overload is that with the recovery and the growth that you're promoted outside of the gym in the 22 plus hours each day, and you'll have days off of the week. So literally DC training in its basic root form is only a 3-day-a-week program.
Okay.
But
that was going to be my question. Is it a 3, a 4? Like what is it built on?
Well, yeah, I'll get to that in a second. But the important part is to note that progressive overload is very often seen as what you do in the gym to force the adaptation by bumping up the stimulus through your efforts. But you also have to have the other side of the coin. So when you do come into the gym, all of the things being equal, your effort is a 10 out of 10. It's 100% everything you can give. You're only going to get more reps with the same weight or use a heavier weight for the same reps or some combination thereof if the recovery has happened. So the progressive overload, everything else being equal, should simply manifest in the gym if you're doing things to recover on the outside. So Dante really takes that progressive overload in DC training, and this is part of Fortitude training too. This really applies to some degree to most training, although people who are not logbooking or maybe using a higher volume approach or what have you may not be doing what sort of distinguishes DC as much as anything, is using that logbook as the quintessential carrot that's dangling in front of you each time you go into the gym. You're going to make that quote logbook your bitch. Like that's the idea. And that's how that program can work. I get questions every once in a while because, there is definitely solid literature, most of which has been created in untrained subjects, showing that there's a dose response curve for volume of training. So it's just simply the number of sets with the presumption that those are taken to failure in this context of a lab setting. And that volume of training has a dose response in terms of muscle growth. So if you just try to do 1 set a week, that obviously is not going to be enough, and certainly not enough in the context of most of those research studies.
Right.
So at some point in time, you may have to go to 10 or 15 sets a week is somewhere where the range might be, depending on the study you look at. And actually, this is a really interesting, on the research side of things, like there's actually one study, one of the Barbalo studies, which was showing a lower volume to be more optimal, has been retracted now because of statistical reasons. Yeah. So that's, and you know,
when was that study done? Do you know off the top of your head?
this was, I think, it was the one with men. There are studies both with women and men. That may have been the 2019 study, I think was the year. So yeah, and I don't know, I actually saw this come across, and I asked one of the authors, I was on ResearchGate, if they plan to publish it with their corrections in place and their reinterpretation, given that some other authors outside of their research group, I guess, looked into this and said, this doesn't make sense. Maybe they even sent them the numbers, sent them their data. So can we take a look at that to analyze it in the way we think is statistically appropriate? And so that came back, it was retracted. One of those was. So the thing about statistics is that basically, to some degree, at its root, there is an arbitrary choice that has to be made as to what you consider, quote unquote, significant.
Right.
So I always use the example, it's in my Be Your Own Bodybuilding Coach book, and you can always sort of think of this, is if you looked at, for instance, the top 10 finishers in the 100-meter dash for the gold medal at the last Olympics, and split them into two groups. Let's say you had enough. Let's say take all of the runners and split the top half from the bottom half, and look for a statistical difference between their speeds or their times for the 100-meter dash. You probably wouldn't find any statistical difference because they're all so clustered together. They're very, very good.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, like, you know, that 0.2 or 0.5 second difference is the difference between getting a medal and not getting a medal. So there's practical significance there in a big way.
Yep.
So I don't want to get off on the research train, but yes, I think you got a question.
That's a really good point to bring up. I mean, a lot of these conversations, they just start flowing in a lot of different directions. Like I told you, that is a really good point to bring up is, you know, if you guys are listening to this and you are reading research, you got to take it all with kind of a grain of salt. Like there's different ways to interpret things and understand, first of all, if it's an actual well put together, laid out study. You know, is there, you know, are there enough subjects to actually make it, you know, worthwhile? What's the environment? How does that actually correlate to what you're trying to do? Is there any correlation to what you're trying to do? Any similarity, I should say?
I mean, there's a context to these studies in terms of what failure means, and this will kind of bring this back around to DC training. And I just mentioned this the other day, I think it was on my podcast, is the individuals who are going to do well with DC training, they really have to be of a certain psychological profile that they enjoy, like that warrior mindset of going in there and just, you know, doing battle with one of nature's primary, you know, basic forces of physics, that being gravity. It's like, I'm going to make this logbook my bitch. I am the absolute alpha of my environment right now, blah, 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 whatever has to happen in their heads.
Right.
Those people are going to be difficult to study because they're not going to want to go into a lab and allow you to like detrain them or switch them to a program that they think might not be optimal. So this is what we would call external validity. So studies will delimit the population they're trying to look at intentionally, like we're looking at women or men or what have you. And then there's also limitations. Like, can we take the findings of these studies and say that this is what we know would happen in individuals with 10 years of training experience, when these individuals had 0 weeks of training experience when they started? So you need to kind of consider that, but that doesn't mean the studies can't inform us of an underlying basic notion that then can be applied. But with DC training, the question I get asked is like, how can you do so low of a training volume? And given what we see in the literature, if you just sort of take that as like a black and white principle that you must, in order to optimize muscle growth, you need to do 15 sets a week for a large muscle group or what have you. How can DC training do this? It's like, well, the simple answer is the people in those training studies haven't been training the way the people who do DC training train.
Not apples versus apples. It's not the same.
Yeah, that's wonderfully said. Yes.
And that's where I try to tell people, like, especially when I'm working with new clients, I was like, listen, we use evidence-based approaches, right? But science is just a starting point. Like, that's where we start from. You might be an outlier. We might have to move some things around. It might not go exactly like, you know, some of the studies or some things that you read go. you are an individual. And I think that's really important for people to understand that. That was a perfect point you brought up. Trying to train people that are coming in to the gym, that they have other jobs that they do, they just like to train. Try to compare that to a professional bodybuilder. Like, let's just use Dusty, for example, Dusty Hanshaw, who's a professional bodybuilder who has a completely different mindset than 95% of the people out there.
99.9.
Oh, 99.9.
Yeah.
You're right. He's an animal. I love him though. I actually I'm trying to get him on the show too.
Oh, cool.
But like, you just can't really always compare, one study that you read to what you see in getting results in the real world. And finding a way to blend those together is where a coach comes in great handy. So take us through what would a typical training session with DC training look like? Let's take legs, for example, lower body.
So with DC training, the basic split is actually a two-way split that someone would do 3 times a week.
Okay.
You can also split things, and that would be just basically essentially an upper lower. You train biceps and forearms with legs. But there's also you can split this into a 3-way split and train 4 times a week. That's for a little more advanced guys. And you lose out on the frequency aspect to some degree. But the basic DC training would be lower. You would start with biceps, then you would do a rest pause set. So that's Dante's version of a cluster set. So there's myo reps. Dante called those rest pause sets because Mike Menser used that term, and he didn't want to try to steal that term. He just would use the same term, although his rest pause sets were very different than the DC training rest pause sets.
Yeah.
I use muscle rounds because that basic format was one I found in Titan training by Leo Costa. I just didn't want to call him Scott clusters or something like that, because you got to give, I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to I'm building upon someone else's idea, so to speak. Right. So a rest pause set would be, and this is one of the basic set types, as I call them in my system of DC training. You're basically doing straight sets, or straight sets that are called Widowmakers. We'll get into those. Yep. And then rest pause sets for the most part. So rest pause set would be something where you pick a weight, you set a range so that you're going to actually have 3 sets that are done as part of this rest pause cluster set. And you pick a range, maybe 15 to 20, it could be 12 to 15, or it could even be 20 to 30, depending on the muscle group you're training. And that can vary over time as well. But you set it up so that you pick a weight where you're going to get, let's say your range is 12 to 15 total reps. You might get 8 to 10 reps before you hit an actual failure point. Yeah. Here's some things on DC training that most people don't do. Like, for instance, you would start with an eccentric contraction.
Okay.
And we can go off on a tangent there. I did this recently on one of the podcasts too. Eccentrics tend to promote higher levels of increased protein synthesis. They tend, if you compare eccentric and concentric only, you get a little bit perhaps of a better growth adaptation from eccentrics only. There's more tension relative to the muscle cross-sectional area or volume that's used during eccentric.
Tighten, right? That the protein tighten that gets activated when you're doing the eccentric.
Well, Titan's it's a structural protein, so it's going to be there as well. It's going to be activated anytime there's force produced. But yeah, Titan's a monstrous, as the name indicates. It's a monstrous protein. But a lot of it is really just simply the fact that by the nature of how muscle contracts, you can look at the force velocity curve is the easiest way to understand this, is that if you take X amount of muscle and you contract it and let those fibers shorten, the amount of force they can produce is a function of the speed. And I kind of feel like I'm repeating myself because it's just a few days ago, but that's okay. It's new information for people.
New audience.
That's many people listening. So the merry-go-round, you're a kid, you're on the playground. Maybe you were the one who had to push the merry-go-round. So everyone would pile on and you're the one who makes them go spin. When you're first pushing at a very slow speed, you can produce a lot of force. Right. You can just feel that. And then as the merry-go-round starts to speed up and go faster and faster, eventually it's going so fast you can't produce any force. And literally, biomechanical things aside, that is because the faster the rate of contraction, the lower the amount of force that you can produce in skeletal muscle. Makes sense. Eventually, if you try to produce really, really quickly, the force would be nothing. And they do this with isolated skeletal muscle in the lab. On the other hand, so an isometric contraction will produce more force than when you're starting to have a shortening concentric.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look on the eccentric side where the muscle's producing force, but it's lengthening, the nature of any amount of muscle mass that's engaged, if it keep that the same, you're going to be able to produce more force eccentrically than you will concentrically. Right. There's kind of a plateau there. It's not perfectly symmetrical one side versus the other. So it's maybe 40% or so in human skeletal muscle. It's 40% more force relative to an isometric.
Okay.
Could be even more than that. But what people can actually voluntarily do is less. So your max eccentric might be 120% of a max isometric. Mm-hmm. Because so much force is produced during those contractions, the nervous system inhibits the output, probably as a protective mechanism.
Right.
So take this back to training where you're doing coupled concentric and eccentric contractions. You're producing much more force on those eccentrics relative to the muscle that's used. In fact, if you held a weight and you wanted to lower that, you have to use less muscle, taking a fatigue aside here. Less muscle has to be activated, otherwise it won't lower. If you kept the same amount of muscle active, it would never go down.
That makes sense, yeah.
Because the muscle produces more force when it lengthens during a lowering movement than during a shortening movement. So that's why people, when they fail, unless it's a neurological thing or they've torn something, most sticking points in failure happens on the concentric.
Right.
You can lower your 1 rep max, under control 8 to 10 times easily in most free weight exercise. You'd be very, very damaging to do that.
Yeah. I don't think people understand how much damage is done on the eccentric portion of the lift. I mean, when you see people in the gym and everything, they're just, pounding through reps and everything, just trying to go as fast as they can. Like they're doing themselves such a disservice.
Yes, well, I'll come back to that too. There's something to be said. There's another sort of overarching umbrella notion, but okay. So this all ties together with the amount of forces produced during those eccentrics. They're also not very energetically expensive. That's why, you can take people on a dynamometer and have them do eccentric only bicep curls. So right. Machine, they push as hard as they can. Machine forces them into an extension at the elbow. Okay. Or you could do it on the knees. I've seen Pertesh as an article or a publication out and you can maintain within 20% or 10% of max effort over 30 reps on the eccentric. The fatigue is very, very low there, but the force is very, very high. And some of that obviously has to do with the way in which energy is transduced at the level of the cross-bridge cycle during cross-bridge cycling of myosin and actin. Yeah. But all of that force also causes lots of damage. Literally, you're causing that primary injury or insult to the contractile apparatus that eventually leads to the inflammation and what you have when you've got delayed onset muscle soreness a day or two later. Gotcha. So with DC training, what you do with these big loads, because you're going to do just one rest pause set in many cases, or could be 2, but chest, shoulders, you've got just that one rest pause set, 3 failure points and some partials thereafter. That's it until you come back again 5 days later, 5 or 6 days later. So you want to start on an eccentric and also end on one. So let's say you get 8 reps. So you get an eccentric and then you get your 8th rep. You also want to do that eccentric there because you can do that. Right. So now you've done with those 8 reps, if my math's right, you make sure you've got an eccentric at the start and at the end. Whereas if you start on a concentric and then finish on the concentric, or maybe you fail there without doing a controlled eccentric and then have your partner take it off you, or maybe you're in a rack where it's safe to do so. Right. You've missed out on 2 of those eccentric only contractions. You've missed out on lowering literally twice. Yeah,
that's really interesting to think of it that way. I haven't even thought of it that way. Actually starting with an eccentric motion. That's
and I never heard Dante explain it in terms of the force velocity curve and this, but this is how I've come to understand it. And I was doing some of those things when I could. You want to. So imagine you're on a hammer strength machine and you start here on your chest press and you get 8 reps and your 8th rep you finish and then you just let it go. You're done. Right. Well, you missed that first eccentric and then you missed the last eccentric. Yeah. So you got 8 concentrics and only 7 eccentrics.
It's like at least don't drop it on that last one. At least get that one eccentric.
Fight it. Fight it. And that's what. So that's what true failure is.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, as long as you can do this safely, because this can be rough if like you're squatting or something like that. If you're rack the bar if you need to. It's not worth dying over because you need to come back to fight another day. But when you're pushing, and you almost get it, but you don't quite, and then you keep on fighting. Now that is going to create some muscle injury. That's a prolonged eccentric. That could be 5, 7, 8 seconds of all-out effort during that lowering, where you're just fighting it until you get down where you need to let the weight loose to get out from under.
Yeah, I'd almost challenge people to whatever you're doing now, and if you're not concentrating on the eccentric portion of it, try to start doing that with the same weight that you're using, and see if you maybe get a little bit more sore than you usually are afterwards. You're probably a lot more sore afterwards.
That's one thing I don't know that I've ever seen that. I mean, you can look at the definitions of momentary muscular failure, but usually it's a concentric failure point, at which point you just come out from under. So in DC training, you would then, let's say you got 8 reps and you included those eccentrics, you would then take 12 to 15 deep breaths. It might be 20 seconds or so. He uses breath count, as I do with the Fortitude training muscle rounds. I have people use a watch sometimes because when you're training legs, your breaths are all over the place. You can't really count on those for an interval. But then you have a partner or you have some way to do this. And I've actually done this with free weights, where I will finish, like if I'm in a rack and I'd finish on the eccentric, and then I would go and pick the bar up to a starting point, in the rack for an overhead press or an incline press or what have you.
Right.
And the next one you might get, let's say you get 3 concentrics, but you get an eccentric, and then you get your 3rd concentric, or let's say you just barely get it, and then you do that negative. There's nothing else coming. So now you've gotten 4 eccentrics there. If you just started with the concentric, and then you stopped, you would only have 1 eccentric total, or 2, sorry.
Yeah,
so now you've doubled the eccentrics on that second part, the second portion of the rest pause set. The same thing applies to the 3rd one.
It makes so much sense from what you're, listening to you talking about. It makes so much sense. It's just, I know especially for a lot of people that haven't studied this stuff like you and I have, and a lot of other people, and you're in the gym, all you know is, I gotta get this weight up. But there's so much to be said for trying to get it back down too.
Yeah. And then after the three actual regular sets of the cluster set, you would also then do partial reps. So you'd start back up and then do a hold, a static,
right,
or do partials and shoot for 30 seconds. You can possibly do that.
Would you say that DC training was probably invented and meant to be done with a partner because of all this forced stuff? I mean, because
ideally you do. You can do it alone.
That's the only thing I'm wondering is like how much, because we all know that when we work out with a partner, we work out harder. It doesn't matter if you think you work out hard. You probably do. Most people probably do. But when you've got someone else there pushing you, there's always another level that you can go to. I think that's just human nature. So I'm wondering, like, if you're trying to do DC training on your own, how much are you actually holding back, because of safety or because of fear or something like that? But that kind of
person. I want to make note of something too before I forget, because you don't do rest pause sets on squats. I just do that as where it would be very unsafe, but you don't do that on squats. Okay. Dante has people doing straight sets on squats and things like deadlifts, most back fitness exercises like bent over rows, because of the danger that could be involved there, and just your low backs, can be the weak point. So make note of that. Don't do that. It's not part of DC training. We haven't even gotten to the past biceps. This is just biceps.
Yeah.
On day 1 which is lower body essentially.
So
training.
How, I guess because we could probably go on about that for an hour or two on itself. Mm-hmm. How did you transition from, DC training and develop Fortitude training, and kind of talk people through what that actually is?
So I've been doing DC training is really, it's whatever Dante says. It's whatever he would have people do things that, for years that were never on the board, because you give people just one sort of particular contextual inconsistency and everyone just like runs with it.
Yeah.
So, and that's part of why he burned out, is was trying to answer so many questions and defend his methods. And finally he's like, do whatever you want to do. I don't care.
So you could basically, in a nutshell, just classify DC training as low volume, high intensity.
No, it's specifically whatever Dante says it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That works.
Because he'd have people do 50 rep sets sometimes.
Oh, really? Okay. See,
Yeah.
I was under the impression that it was just very low volume, but like, maybe you'll get up to the 12, 15 rep range, but you're giving it hell. You're going beyond failure.
You obviously haven't done a Widowmaker, then a DC style Widowmaker for legs.
I haven't. And
yes.
I need to get in the gym with you, and you need to show me how to do a proper Widowmaker.
Well, here's a funny story. This is because it applies. So that I had, trying to think, this may have been, I can't remember. I was coming back to DC training. This was years ago. And this is when I had my gym, and the first trainer at my gym wanted to start training with me. So I'm like, okay, well, we're starting up on Monday or whatever. That was leg day. So we made our way through the workout, and with legs, you would use a compound. It's basically thighs. We call them quads, but I think we did a heavy set and then kind of a back off set. And then you do a Widowmaker. And a Widowmaker is typically a 20 rep set, but you could do a 30 rep set as a Widowmaker. And the idea of a Widowmaker is that if you were married, you would perform that set in a way that would make your wife a widow, because you absolutely literally just kill yourself. It's a death set, essentially. Okay. Another way to say that. And so we came around to that. So you pick a weight. People typically would describe this as, pick a weight you would get. The average person might get like 12 reps with and then stop because they've got 2 or 3 in the tank. You were trying to make the set as absolutely, utterly brutal as possible without putting the weight down to rest with it. So it's a very, very intermittent set. And these can go on for 3 minutes sometimes, because you get better at sort of strategizing how to get more reps.
Right.
And your mental
right away.
Yeah, exactly. So you let's say you're going to end up with 20 reps. You might end up stopping at 12. You get up, bang out 12 that are continuous, and then you take 3 or 4 deep breaths, and then you bang out 2, but not 3, because that third one would really sort of push you to where the next rep might be failure. So you just do 2, because if you do 2 and you take 10 breaths, you can then do 2 more again. Yeah. And then take 10 more breaths, and then get a single, and then you might take 15 breaths, and this time you're kind of, you're wavering back and forth, but you're safe. You're in a rack where you can dump if you need to. And then you get a single, and then you take 10 deep breaths again, and then you try another single, and literally you just keep going. And what should basically be happening to anyone who's never seen this is they think you're done after the 12. Okay, he's gonna rack it. Oh no, he's going for it. This guy must have someone must have cut him off in traffic, or he's fucking there's an extra gear, there's something loose up here, and then you keep doing that. So those could be 20 rep sets or 30 rep sets.
So it's, I kind of equate that to, your, when you start these Widowmakers, they're obviously towards the end of the training session, right?
Yeah, so he would add those in the 3-way split. So you do them when you're training a given muscle group. But with legs, that's the last. Yeah, he likes to put the hardest thing at the end.
Right.
So that and that's also a cognitive psychological strategy too. This is all I got. After this, the day's over. Empty myself right there. It's all going in.
I love that feeling. I kind of equate it to you're going into that set. You've got a quarter of a tank left in your gas tank, and you're running it down just before empty, but then you're stopping, refilling it up a little bit when you're doing these Widowmakers. When you're saying you can maybe do 15 in a row, but you only do 12, and you take a little break. Mm-hmm. And then you can hammer out 5 more, and then you take a little break. So that's kind of how I'm visualizing it in my head, is that gas tank is just that needle's kind of going down right before it hits E. You kind of fill a little bit more gas up, and then you go a little bit more, and just kind of tinkering
if you get too close to fatigue, then when you take that little bit of a break, you don't recover quite as much. So your fatigue level goes to here. If it goes down too low, you never quite get high enough to get more reps. But if you don't go quite so far, you can recover a little bit. So you want to just it's the area under the curve, basically. Get as many reps as you can, however long that may take.
See, so that's really interesting. I want to just kind of piggyback off that for a second. What are your thoughts on? Because we've seen studies that come out that say you don't have to train to failure. to elicit hypertrophy, right? Like
Right.
you can be within a couple reps, RPE 7, something like that. Hell, even with blood flow restriction, you can get down to 30% of your 1 rep max, right? And still.
Well, that's load, not failure, but yeah.
Yeah. So what is your opinion though? Because I just know there's a difference between how my muscle feels and how it grows when I might stop at, that RPE 7 as opposed to going to failure. Like, what are your thoughts on that kind of in between range right there? Like, I guess what I'm asking is, how much more beneficial is it to do more of a DC style training when you are taking things to failure, as opposed to maybe backing off a little bit and leaving a little bit in reserve?
So you just basically open up I could spend a whole day talking about this whole notion. Basically, the worm cans are exploding now, right? So there's this notion of effective reps applies without a doubt. And there also is, to some degree, a law of diminishing returns. So the closer you get to a true failure point, my sense has always been that the extent to which you sort of create an inroad into your nervous system, gets exponentially greater. Stopping 2 reps shy of failure versus taking a set to concentric and eccentric failure, world of difference. It could only be 2 reps on paper, but it's a huge difference in terms of what that leaves you with.
Right. What it's
so the balance point that I've tried to strike with Fortitude training, for instance, with just straight sets, depends on, I have different volume tiers, so you do a number of these straight sets, as I call them, loading sets. So heavy, like 6 to 12 rep range. Okay. Is if you're going to do 3 of them on that day, some of this just for practical reasons, stop 1 or 2 reps shy of failure. So 1 or 2 reps in reserve, essentially. This is before that reps in reserve notion even kind of came out. I was using that as a guide.
Right.
Because you're going to get most of the bang for your buck from those heavy sets. And also there's the pain in the ass of, if you've truly gone to failure, then if you're training legs, you got to get the machine back up to the starting point, because you don't want to, sometimes you're down in the bucket, you can't really get out of there very easily, and it's just, pain in the butt. So you get a lot of, from a stimulus standpoint, you're going to get, and the research shows this, there's a meta-analysis, training failure versus non-training failure, pretty much equivalent, at least in mainly untrained individuals.
Yeah.
So, but over time, if you apply the same amount of effort and literally you train with sort of the nervous system of a newbie, I think your gains would be limited. Okay. Eventually, as you move forward and you start going from 135 pound squat to 185 to 225 to 275 to 315, 405, 455, 495, we're getting up 5, 6, 7. Then there's going to have to be an ante that gets upped in terms of neurological effort that you're putting forth. You're learning how to do this. Some of it's skill, some of it's like, how much am I willing to do? The story that I didn't quite get to is that day with my trainer at the gym. We got to the end and I did my Widowmaker, and so he was following me because he didn't know the system. I did my Widowmaker, and once I kind of crawled out and caught my breath, I asked him what he wanted weight wise, and he hadn't even gotten up. He's just sitting there, and I look over at him, and he just says, "I'm not doing that." That's it. That was it. Like, he didn't do the Widowmaker, and we didn't train together. He's like, "I know I'm not going to do this." Yeah. So there's going to be some limitation. Sorry, go ahead.
Honest about it, right?
I totally respected that. I'm like, okay, yeah, that didn't waste my time either. I didn't want to train with that energy. If he tried to kind of lollygag along, reluctantly, I wouldn't have wanted that as a training partner, and he just didn't want to do it. So there's something to say for training to failure, because I think sort of inversely to the inroads in your nervous system, you have a tremendous amount of experience that comes with taking those sets right up to either a failure point or to where you've got basically 0 reps in reserve. There's nothing left there. Yeah. Because that teaches you how to push harder and harder, which is the one side of that progressive overload coin.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you don't know what true failure feels like, you can't really gauge everything else. Like, if something's calling for an RIR of 1 or 2, it's like, you don't really know what that is unless you know what true failure is.
And that's what, I mean, Eric Helms has talked about in his, original, like, there's some people when they actually take them, they publish this, I believe, you take them and they can get 8 or 10 more reps. They think, oh, I'm going to be able to, I'm done here, keep going. And they've got plenty left in the tank.
That's kind of goes back to that statement I was making earlier, as far as like, you think you work out hard by yourself, but when there's somebody there that's not yelling at you, but, driving you, pushing you and everything, I know personally on my end, I'm the same way. What I think is failure in my mind is not necessarily failure if I have somebody there that's stronger than me and that's pushing me.
Yeah. I mean, I said, like, the ideal training partner for many people is someone who's going to make you their bitch. Pardon my French, but literally, like, there's always someone out there who trains harder than you.
Yeah.
But here's the thing that we have to consider too, and this is why I have different volume tiers. Like, one of the hardest training people, he was a former WWE, WF wrestler, and he won his class at the Canadian Nationals. He could only use the lowest volume tier in Fortitude training because he trained so hard. Mm-hmm. So if your training efforts aren't like over the top, which is what you're trying to do with dog crap training, then you're going to get a lot of the stimulus from those somewhat lesser effort 1, 2, 3, 4 reps in reserve type sets, and then more volume is actually going to be appropriate. Gotcha. and doable.
Right.
So, and the thing is too, is that the whole nature of the stimulus that produces the growth is a hormetic one. So there's some optimal amount of stimulus. Once you go beyond that, it's too much, because in the context of your frequency, the next time you're going to come back, you simply haven't adapted to the previous stimulus. So your adaptation is suboptimal.
That's really important to bring up too, is that, like, keeping in mind what you're doing during this training session is going to set you up for the next training session. And obviously, you get out of it the nutrition, the sleep, the recovery, things like that. What are some of the supplements, but some of the recovery techniques or suggestions that you guys have for someone coming out of doing like a DC or a Fortitude style training? Like, what are some supplements that you would recommend would be like a go-to for everybody?
Oh, like out of like the finishing, just generally speaking, after a workout or what have you?
Yeah, but more towards those higher intensity type.
Yeah,
like that.
I find in people who have done this, like, they tried it actually for themselves, and you want to have some nutrients available during the session, which is what an intra-workout, or what I generally call a peri-workout recovery supplementation drink would typically do for you. You don't necessarily need that per se if you have a large, sizable meal an hour before and then you eat right afterwards. Right. You've got the nutrients that are there, but there's you can look at the best studies that have been done in that. And here's the thing, you mentioned outliers before, and I'll just throw this out to you because it's an important way of sort of sizing up the literature, is especially for competitive bodybuilders, you don't want to be the average. Inferential statistics is looking at differences in means, given the standard deviations. We do an analysis of variance very typically. What would happen if you were to randomly sample from the populations and randomly sample from the whole population, this case of people who are willing to submit themselves to a novel resistance training exercise regime because they haven't been training at all? What would you expect to happen? And it might be nothing. It may make no bit of difference whether or not they take in a post-workout or an intra-workout drink for those people. And that's a whole other topic. You want to be an outlier. You want to be extraordinary. That's kind of the point. Yeah. So when the research tells us this is what we would expect, and I would not argue against that whatsoever, if that's what that study showed or the bulk literature shows or a meta-analysis shows, there's a pretty good chance, given what we know from that literature, it's not absolutely certain, but that's what you would want to expect if you're a gambling man. Yeah. We've got the assumptions that underlie that. But if you have a couple studies that were well done and well constructed that suggest, for instance, that peri-workout recovery supplementation does work, and there's a study by Cribb and Hayes, Darren Willoughby's done a study. There's a study showing that just carbohydrate during a workout, tarpenning is the first name, the extent to which cortisol levels are reduced across subjects, there's a correlation on the order of 0.7, 0.8 with the eventual muscle growth that you see in the type 1 and type 2 fibers evaluated through biopsy. There's studies that show that there can be very effective the very impactful effect of peri-workout recovery supplementation, taking in food during your workout, protein and carbohydrates. And we can go into the mechanisms there. So that's, if it's possible that it might work and there's nothing really strong to suggest it's going to have a negative impact, then I'm looking for those outlying studies or those outlying individuals. Right. Assuming it's not just a genetic thing, you can't go down to GNC and pick up, your Flex Wheeler trademark genetic,
where can you get that stuff that Ronnie Coleman got?
Yeah, right. Like, well, go find his dad, his mom, do a little in vitro and you're good to go, but it won't be you.
I think I heard an old interview one time with Ronnie. They're like, how did this all happen? Or where does this come from? He goes, I don't know. Thank my mom and dad.
Yeah.
That's the truth.
Absolutely.
Though. You can't get past genetics sometimes.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about your Fortitude training. You've kind of been mentioning a little bit throughout this. You talked about your loading sets, which are the heavier, lower rep stuff at the beginning. And then you mentioned earlier about muscle rounds. So take us through what the muscle rounds are.
Well, muscle rounds.
I'm missing a step in between.
Well, I have 3 set types.
Right. The loading.
So you mentioned blood flow restriction. We have those low load training sets. Training studies. We know that in the untrained folks as well, especially that's been demonstrated, like 4 or 5 good studies now, I think, you can get equivalent muscle growth using like 30% of 1 rep max. So roughly about a 20 to 30 rep set type of load as if you use like an 8 to 10 rep heavier load, 70, 80, even 90% of 1 rep max. So I've got loading sets, which are the heavier, so we've got kind of a range we can work there. But loading sets, 6 to 12 rep range, pump sets, which are 20 to 30 rep. Okay. And then what would typically be somewhere around maybe a 12 or 15 rep max load, there's a cluster set that I've created or that I've modified from Leo Costas, because Leo Costas, I had no idea really I tried it as best I could and it was way too much. Okay. But he's set that up with 6 sets of 4 reps. So there's a challenge to anyone listening to this. So far, I have yet to see anyone on Instagram, this is over years now, accurately represent what a muscle round is. Everyone just says it's 6 set of 4 reps. And let's just say that. So much more to this. So much more. So this is important.
Let's hear about
it. So much more. So the idea is that you have 6 sets and you're shooting for 4 reps per set. And you've got about 5 breaths, or if you're doing legs where your breathing is going to get out of control, you use a stopwatch or the clock on the wall. Give yourself 10 seconds rest. That gives you about a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio, which is nice because you can do bilateral exercises. So you do set of 4, take 5 breaths, set of 4, and I'll explain how the muscle round would go from there. Or if you want to do unilateral, you just do a set of 4, one side, set of 4, the other side, set of 4. And you can choose the same relative load and not mess up the timing of the work to rest ratio because it's 1-to-1 in the muscle round. The idea is you've picked a load where you can do 3 sets of 4 with that 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. 5 breaths are roughly 10 seconds. That's kind of up to the person and the day and the exercise, what have you. And then you at least get into the 4th set before you fail. You'd have only 1 failure point because that really takes a toll on the nervous system. Yeah. The muscular system has probably a better ability to adapt overall than your nervous system. Right. That's a whole tangent that we definitely won't have time for.
No, we'll have to come back on and talk about that one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Love to. And then thereafter, you would continue after your failure point. Let's say it does happen. You get 2 reps and you fail on the 3rd. You would then drop the weight down so that you can finish the last 2 sets of 4 of the muscle round without a failure point, keeping on that rough tempo as best you can. You may have to pull some plates, so don't worry about the rest interval after you failed, but do your best to keep it on track. And then you've taken what would have been, in that case, if you had just stopped, you've just done 4, 4, 4, so 12 plus 2, 14 reps, which might have been, if you did a straight set, maybe you would have gotten, let's say, 17, 18 reps. But you've done those 2 sets of 4 thereafter. You've added 8 reps to this with only 1 failure point. So we're accruing volume of training on the nervous system while trying to minimize the inroads into the nervous system.
Yeah.
And because the muscular system, we look at some of the like compensatory hypertrophy mechanisms. You cut the soleus, watch the gastroc grow in animals. That's a continuous all day long type of stimulus. You just can't go in the gym and train all day long. Your nervous system would eventually get whacked. Your immune system would be impacted. Your endocrine system would go to hell, and that would be it. You just can't do that all day long. It's just you can't recover. So a muscle round would then be done in that fashion with the idea that you're also going to try to progressively overload here with these exercises and these muscle rounds. So let's say you got 2 reps in the 4th set and then you failed. Next time you set your mind to it, you try to get all the way through the 4th set. You get all 4 reps into the 5th. So you get 2 reps there. Then you drop the weight down. Do the 6th set. No more failure points. You just drop the load somewhere 10 to 30%.
Okay.
And the nice thing that happens there, you've got there's no pressure to make that, all out. I'm going for the gusto. I'm going to just bury myself. I would tell people I want you to refocus on perfect form. All that kind of squirming you did, or like breaking of form or pulling in activation of accessory muscles. Don't do that. Imagine someone's filming you for a workout form video, laser-like focus on the target muscle.
Yeah.
And you reestablish that, you reestablish your good form. So there's a skill phenomenon going on here too, as well as you're getting better at the mind-muscle connection. Gotcha. Which I think carries over to the other set types.
Oh, absolutely.
So some people who like to train heavy, they might always choose to use weights where they fail in the 4th set and then just drop down for the 5th and 6th. And they could just keep on bumping the weights up. Sometimes it's fun to keep the weight the same and work your way to your failing in the 5th and find the 6th. Once you can get 6 sets of 4, but don't stop. If you get 4, don't just stop. You go to failure.
Yeah.
Then you might move the weight up, and you could keep it where you fail in that 6th one, or you could make a huge jump so that you fail again in the 4th, and you keep on progressing. So you can move both the weight and the reps and to where you feel like you have the best ability to train the muscle for the given exercise. Some of them lend them to heavier loads. Some of them lend themselves better to lighter loads.
It's interesting because I guess I was under the impression that there was no dropping the weight with those. I thought that it was like you just kind of cluster set yourself until you get 4 sets or whatever it is of that. Now, when you're picking a weight for that, are you trying to pick? So let's just say the 6 sets of 4. Are you trying to pick a weight that you would be able to try to get 5 with or 6 reps with? Like, how are you gauging that the weight that you're picking?
The very first time you do it,
yeah.
If you have no idea, something where you could do it's roughly a 15 rep max where the reps are continuous.
Oh.
So not where not a 15 rep Widowmaker.
Gotcha.
Because the reps in Fortitude training, even within those groupings of 4 reps, they're always continuous. I don't want to, in the pump sets, I don't want to have people pausing, because then you continue to accumulate those reps where you're like right at failure. Mm-hmm. And those ones, that ratio of inroads to your nervous system versus the muscular system is pretty high.
Right.
You keep doing a bunch of those like on a Widowmaker, that's it. Your blast is going to come to a screeching halt. And it's no wonder you thought that, because I never see anyone put out an accurate description. Yeah. You don't just pick a 15 rep max and do 6 sets of 4 and just stop and like be done. Like, okay, so
where was the challenge at that point?
There's there's no progressive overload. Like, what if you don't even what if you haven't even tested that's a 15 rep max, and you could have gotten, some people will sometimes do these and maybe they underestimated. They do 5 sets of 4 and in the 6th one, they get 12 reps. Well, that's probably a little too light. You know that because you went to failure at that last point. The idea is really that you use the logbook to guide, and the 15 rep max is just to get you in the ballpark. It's like this, like here's the stadium, 15 rep max, you're there, but your particular seat, you're going to have to look on your ticket, which is your logbook, and figure out where you're going to go. And then how are you going to progress is a matter of you and the exercise. Some people want to go heavy as shit. They keep it where they're just barely getting into the 4th one.
Yeah.
Some people it's arms, and they know they'll get tendonitis issues if they try to train too heavy. They just keep it where they just progress slowly, and literally they're getting a 3rd and 4th rep in that 6th set every time. They're just bumping it up a little bit, so they're always failing near the end. So that way there's some adjustments, some sliding in terms of the relative loads you use depending on you and the exercise, et cetera, et cetera. And even the day, it could be like, I've got, like, let's say I do like an incline Smith press. The muscle rounds are sort of like, I want you to progressively overload, but they're also auto-regulated in the program. So the loading sets, you come back around. Those are the formalized. Today, I got no choice. They rung the bell. I've got to do battle with barbell back squats. That's what's on my thing. I'm going to do it. If obviously, like, it's a no-go because your back is hurt, or you have some other issue, you got to train smart. The muscle rounds are like, that exercise is going to, I'm going to use that hammer strength machine, the hammer strength shrug machine, to do some bent over rows on that. That's going to feel really good. The barbell rows today, it's just not going to work, I don't think. Just doesn't feel right. I just did rack deads. I know I did these barbell rows last week, but I want to do this. So you look back in your logbook and say, last time I did these bent over, but I couldn't get my foot placement properly. So I made a note to myself, go a little bit lighter, because you were kind of like squirming around. So you do that, but then you still got a marker that you're trying to move forward. And you can look back. I suggest people kind of keep a pool in the back of their logbook, like a page for back stuff. And you just sort of note as you want. I organize my logbook. I could just flip back until I find the exercise very easily.
Right.
It's an index card, so it's very easy to do that. But
that's that you're bringing up about the logbook. Like, too many people are just going in there winging it, and not even that. I mean, a lot of people are following programs, but they're not really having that hard data to go off of from week to week. Like, how are they feeling? That was a big thing, is like, how are you feeling? Where was your foot placement? You just said that. Like, make little notes like that. My foot placement was wrong on this. I need to fix it for this next time. Or just small little things like that can make a world of difference with your progress.
Yeah, I think here's the thing, though. Like I said, when we started talking about DC training, it's a matter of the person's mindset and mentality. I literally just heard Jay Cutler talking about, he did an interview or like a Q&A with Fuad. Don Meadows out.
Yeah, I saw that one. Yep.
And so he's just talking about, he used to log his stuff, but he never went back and looked at it. He wrote it down, and because he didn't need to. And if for some people, if you said, and this happens, it's like you're going to have to go back. It just takes the joy out of it for them a little bit too much. Yeah. So that's why I think people like Fortitude training, they recognize there's value in coming around to those loading sets, and like the DC mindset of like, progressive overload has to happen. It's do or die today, baby. But then the muscle rounds are like, you know what? That exercise doesn't make sense. I'm in a new gym. I'm going to try these, or I saw Scott do this on his Instagram. I'm going to try this exercise. It looks like it feel really good.
Yeah.
You can do that. And the pump sets are very much winged. They're auto-regulated in terms of selection. You can, if you want, logbook those, but those are all about mind-muscle connection, making sure you're creating metabolic stress, so to speak, or a pump. Whether metabolic stress is that important or not is kind of another question per se. But so it's got a blend of, you get to go in there and like have a fun day. You're on vacation. You're going to go to the gym in the Jamaicas, whatever. And you're just going to go in there and get a pump and, go walk out on the beach and, feel awesome. It's like that. Those are fun workouts. You do whatever the fuck you want to do. Pardon my French.
Absolutely. Great. And there's a time and place for all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So with Fortitude training, you can literally have some of the fun of a new gym or new exercises each day, and auto-regulate appropriately. But you also, there's enough of a progressive overload, and you can apply that universally in a way that does exactly what you're saying. Like, if you want to get every last bit out of your workout, for some people that fits with them. But I think for other people, to be honest, if you said, I want you to write down every last detail, that would probably rob them of their enthusiasm in a way that might actually limit how hard they train and the stimulus they can evoke. It might actually retard their gains, so to speak.
Right. Be
some people. Yeah.
Yeah. I've noticed that with some of the things, how I program for clients and, have them track things. Certain clients, I have to just leave it out. Like, some clients, I can have them track all the elements, all the variables I want them to track. Some I have to be like, okay, we're going to take this row out. You don't have to track that because you're not going to. And it's just really getting to know your clients and what's going to make them tick, because you have to find, if you're writing a program for somebody, you're coaching somebody, you have to put them in the best position to not only be, physically able to perform the exercise, but also mentally. That's a huge component.
It starts up here, really. I mean,
100%.
this is, yeah. I mean, the thing I've done in years past is I did this for years before DC training, and I tell people is that, you know, it's okay to pick 1, 2, maybe 3 different kind of test exercises for each muscle group. Let's say whatever your training regime may be, whatever split, frequency, what have you. And you might go like every other workout. And the thing that you do that when you start off for back training is you're going to say, today's a test day. I'm going to use bent over rows and rack deads as my 2 main exercises for using strength progression as a surrogate marker of muscle growth. Right. So I know if I've gone from bent over rowing 225 to bent over rowing 315, it's probably going to show up in my back, assuming I've just not got totally sloppy.
Absolutely.
So you go in on those days, and when you feel like it makes sense to do this, you feel good. You'll do this every time when you feel equivalently good. And you pick that weight, and let's say it's 275. Last time I got 8 reps. I'm going to go in this time. I'm going to just try to do 1 test set where I can get 11, or if I get 11 or 12, that's good. Boom. I mark that down. 2 weeks later, you might do the rack deads, and then you come back to that, and you do your other training, whatever it is, however you want to do it. Jay Cutler's style, he has an idea, but it may change when he gets in the gym, or maybe it's totally free forming.
Yeah.
But as long as you're doing, here's the thing, this is why that other side of progressive overload matters. As long as you've got the weight moving in the right direction, body weight's going to have to move for most people who've been training for a while. The guys who I want to make my arms bigger, and like, well, how much weight have you added in the last 2 years? 1.5 pounds body weight. I'm like, everything's going to have to go if you want the arms to go.
Yeah.
So if those things are going, you can go back and use just those test measurements, and you're checking on the progressive overload, so to speak. And you're also sort of resetting your mind too that more weights are important. Right. And so you're giving yourself just enough accountability to where you don't feel like, God, this is just taking the fun out of it. This actually should be sort of a fun test. You know, absolutely. It's kind of like cracking the oven open to see like, okay, it's almost ready. You know, I can't wait to eat this. So you go in and you like, I think I'm going to be strong as shit today when I do those bent over rows. I'm going to try that out.
Yeah.
And if you're not like, okay, what happened? Well, shit, I haven't gained any weight since last time I did those. I need to work on the recovery side of things.
And some like bent over rows, squats, bench press, if you're using those markers, like there is a lot of skill and technique that goes into it. But if you're testing it every 2 or 3 weeks, like you're not going to lose that skill. You're not going to lose that technique. No. It's like if you don't test it for 6 months, we might have an issue. You know, it might not be a valid exercise to test it on. But I like that what you said there. You know, every 2 or 3 weeks, just throw it into your program for the day. See where it's at. See if it's gone up at all. Or see, you know, and videotape yourself. We talked about videotaping earlier and stuff, and it's like, look at your form. I think it was yesterday actually. I just Matt Jansen posted a post on Instagram where he was doing a T-bar row, and it was the top video was him doing the same weight like 3 weeks ago or something, and the bottom video the same weight, and he had it timed perfectly, and you could just see like his reps were more fluid, they were quicker, they were like he wasn't struggling as much. It was the same weight, but he was perfecting his form, he was getting the tempo a lot better and stuff. So, you know, having different elements like that, you know, not just the weights increase, but how is your form looking? Are you performing the exercise better now? That goes a long way.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, and this harkens back to a mind-muscle connection. And actually, Brad Schoenfeld has a study out showing this. They train both upper body, biceps, elbow flexors, and knee extensions. That with bodybuilding, you actually want the exercise to be as literally kind of as hard as possible in a sense, with an internal attentional focus. Yeah. So everything else the same. You want to make you don't want to have any accessory muscles involved, no extraneous activation that doesn't focus the load on the target muscle. So you could go and do squats every week if you haven't done them regularly, and just sort of change your tempo and learn and have a skill come and basically perform the exercise better, and have that what you write in the logbook being very poorly representative of any muscle growth. Right. You're just getting better at squatting. You don't have a bigger engine driving the squat. You've just got a better driver behind the engine, behind the wheel.
There's some quote, and I don't even know who said this, but I heard it years ago, and I always loved it. It's, you know, powerlifting's about making heavyweight look light, and bodybuilding's about making lightweight look heavy.
Absolutely.
Love that.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
Well, Dr. Scott, I could probably keep you on here for 2 more hours, but I'm going to be respectful of your time. And I would love to have you back on, because I think we already pointed out 3 or 4 topics that we could make whole other videos on and stuff. But I just want to thank you so much. This was great. And I am serious. I want to get together for a workout soon and have you take me through one of those true Widowmaker rounds.
Yeah, I have, I think I have them on, I have some on my Instagram. I started doing those just because I wanted to, because I mean, I wish my body could recover from more crazy, training. I would train all the time. I'd train twice a day probably, but it just doesn't work. But I think I've got some of those on my Instagram.
How much are you, what's your frequency right now? Are you doing like 4 or 5 days a week?
No, I'm actually just doing every other day. It's a long story. I get asked this all the time because I'm various reasons, but I was on a road trip and then my truck broke down when I was trying to get back with the COVID thing. So I was stuck in an RV park for 16 days. It was fine. It was actually a blast. I almost stayed for a while longer.
Is that when you were doing all the fence, the tree work and all that? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I was thinking, I'm thinking I'm going to leave tomorrow. I'm going to work out. And then I would try to, and then I'd spend a whole day trying to leave. And then I break down again, have to come back. So I've just been on basically an every other day for quite a while now, which works great. I'm blending together Fortitude training set types with some DC stuff. I've done some rest pause things. So it's all the basic same stuff, but it's usually 3.5, I guess. Every other day is how I've been doing it, upper, lower. So the frequency is a little less. And I encourage everyone. It's people what a hypocrite. He's not using his own training system.
Or people complain about anything, you know that. So.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, but it's a valid concern. You would think if it's sort of well, if he's a Christian, why is he doing all this? He's talking to the Hindu gods, or it's his religion. It's got to be just that. But my religion is to find what works as much as you possibly can. And I don't care if it's my stuff or whomever's, but I suggest people use DC training and Fortitude training and Mountain Dog training those are the 3 systems I'm familiar with. And you can rotate amongst those,
Yeah, that'd be, you could run each one of them for, a 12 to 16 week block or something, however you want. Split it up. Yeah. I think those are all 3 great training programs. And what are you plan on competing anymore? I know you're kind of secretive.
Well, I did 5 shows last year.
I know you're kind of secretive about jumping into some shows. So.
Oh yeah. I can. Part of it is you get the same questions. You have to be careful because how's your prep going? How's your prep going? It's good. I just spent 45 minutes answering the question, and it's great that people care. But what I want to do is take whatever information can come from those preps and produce that, use that as in a way that helps other people. Because for me, it just slows me down from answering more productive questions. Literally, I view all this as service to others, really, mainly, and it's almost a disservice. If you look at it the way I have, it's a disservice to just say, look, I'm doing this, that, the other, because the information, changing all that information is just slows me down. Imagine if every day was your birthday and everyone knew it on Facebook. Yeah. And you got 1,000 birthday wishes. You're never getting anything else done. I want to respond to everyone if I possibly can. So
that's a really funny point you just brought up, because I have a friend whose birthday was a few weeks ago, and he never tells anybody about it. He doesn't, because he's I don't want all those messages on Facebook, all those disingenuous messages that I have to answer. He's I just let my my close friends and my family know, and that's all that needs to know.
Yeah. And it's not that the questions are necessarily disingenuous, but how's the prep going thing is I just mentioned this. We're going to do a Q&A for next week's My Muscle Minds podcast. And sometimes people will say, what are your thoughts on this? Or they'll just name a topic and they'll say thoughts. And I'm I don't I could just talk for a day. That doesn't tell me things. So how's it going? I want to be able to take the important, vital information that really is useful for the person. I love the concern and I love that people want to know, but my job is, I think, to do the best I possibly can to provide quality, in-depth information. And that just kind of gets in the way almost. Yeah. In doing
the context of the question, what do you know about prep?
Right.
Am I hungry? Am I tired? Am I what's going on? What do you want to know specifically?
Oh, and none of that even matters to me. None of that about the hungry, tired thing. I mean,
So normal. Yeah.
I mean, I really, it doesn't, it's like immaterial to me, really. Unless there's something I can share from that, because there are strategies that I've used. Someone were to say, Scott, what do you think's was there a salient moment or a sort of an epiphany that you had in the way that your mindset shifts when you go into prep that's allowed you to be so able to weather the mental rigors of prep when you're deep down and very low body fat? Like, I just came up with that question. I'm like, that's a good question. I would love to talk about that one. Let's do that.
Absolutely.
But for me, it's like, if you ever, I was in therapy for years, and like one of the rules in therapy is, and I think this is a good one, and it sort of applies to the way I look at things, is self-disclosure isn't something that a lot of therapists, some therapists don't ever want to do. Like Freudian therapists would never self-disclose. It's not their role to do that. But I think it makes sense if someone comes in and like they're talking about, I just caught my husband, he's cheating on me, and I found out he's been doing this, and like they're going through, and if the therapist then says, oh my God, that happened to me last year, oh my gosh, and they start that doesn't help the person who they're trying to serve in their patient or client.
Right.
So my self-disclosure, unless I know it's important. So sometimes someone will say, this, like they come in and like my therapist, every once in a while, she would self-disclose something to me. And when she did, it was really important and vital.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it is. It's like my job is to help as many people as possible. I don't self-disclose to clients unless like I need to explain like why I dropped the ball on something and I feel really bad, but if it can help them, I'll tell you anything. Like I have no problem self-disclosing. Yeah. Trust me, I'm an open book, but only if it's important to people,
That's the way it should be. That's the way more people need to be in this industry, because really when it comes down to it, it's like, you sharing knowledge to help somebody else isn't hindering you. We should all be trying to build each other up and helping each other, whether it be from a competing standpoint or just trying to get healthy again. That's what most of us, I think, try to get into this industry for. And I hope more people kind of take your lead on that. So.
Yeah. It's very often, I think there's a tremendous responsibility that comes with being someone who's a coach or someone who's trusted as an authority. And a lot of coaches can sometimes, you hear the horror stories of coaches abusing that because you've got this imbalance in terms of the client is going to listen to what you have to say. And they're also you're learning about their body image issues and all these things. And like, they're vulnerable to you. And so you've got the upper hand. If someone has ulterior motives, like really bad things can happen. And that's why like there's Health Information Privacy Act in medicine. And, I know of a situation of an acupuncturist back in Arizona who ran into a client at a party, like had no idea that person would be there. And the person brought up some things like in the course of conversation, like they initiated the topic, and then he ended up having to go defend himself in front of the state board because that's an illegal, you can't like talk about, client stuff in the open. And that was crazy. That was silly for that to happen, but that depicts how serious that is. So I don't want to talk about my clients unless they've made it known, and it's all about them. It's all about them. Like you ever had a waiter who like all of a sudden just starts dumping on you and you're like,
oh yeah,
I feel bad for you. And sometimes it's okay. Sometimes it's like, it's nice conversation, but sometimes it's like, man, I was just having a really important conversation with my friend here, and I just would like to get our food. Like maybe afterwards we could chat or something.
Like, I hope your problems get solved, but right now.
Yeah. It can be out of place, in some circumstances, and it can very well be out of place. So that's sort of how I look at it. It's like, man, it's not about me. It's about you. Now, if you're struggling and you want to know that I struggle too, fuck yeah, I struggle. I ain't perfect. Yeah. I'll definitely do that if it helps you. But anyway, so.
No, and I think that's great.
I'm like competing. I might do some shows. Yeah, possibly.
No, I think that's really great. And I know we tried to end this a little bit ago, but we've just gotten into a great discussion. But just the fact that what you put out is very powerful because you don't disclose everything. So like when you do have information to put out there, it makes it more powerful because it's like, okay, Dr. Scott's putting this out. It's got to be real serious at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and the thing is that I think, here's part of this. I know this very clearly now, is that the perspective I have on bodybuilding and being your own bodybuilding coach and sort of learning and being self-reliant in that way. I'm lucky. Like some people, bodybuilders are gifted in that they've just got great genetics, and so that whatever they do, they drive by the gym and they gain a couple ounces of muscle just because that's just how they're put together. Yeah, right. And my family of origin was such that I had and this is important for people to know, because it makes these things. I literally learned as a child to be very, very self-reliant. I took on the role of the perfect child because there was some dysfunction in my family. So I had to try to stay out of being a worry whatsoever to my parents. They had bigger things to worry about.
Right.
So I became very adept at not complaining, at keeping things in, not, basically making sure that I could cover any and all possible troubles, issues, emergencies on my own. Yeah. And I would never talk about them. So and I don't necessarily try to do that consciously, but it just makes it easy for me. Some people are not, they just didn't have that. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It wasn't the way I, would have ideally grown up if I could have it over to do again. But, so that makes it a little bit easier for me. And so someone's like, how does that fucker do that? He just doesn't seem to care. He's like, he should be starving. He should be hurting or whatever. I think, everyone's like, that guy just grows like crazy, or that woman just like, how does she get, she has perfect skeletal structure. Her muscle bellies are perfect. Like, she looks like she's a statue. Like, that's just not fair. And she gets lean in all the right places and all comes off, perfectly balanced. She never holds any fat on her butt. Like, screw her. That sucks.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it is, I think, with me to some degree. I've just had a lot of circumstances that have made me who I am today. And you can't always compare yourself to someone else because you don't know who made them that way, or if they even made themselves, so to speak.
Yeah. Genetic gifts don't just come in the form of physical gifts. They come in the form of, mental toughness, being able to adapt to situations and learn from it and thrive. So I think that's absolutely great. And I've been through a lot of bad times in my past too. And, things that I probably shouldn't have lived through. And, I did, and I'm here and I'm stronger and I'm better because of it. And, you don't ever let go of those experiences. You use them to fuel you moving forward and realize that, okay, I fucked up here. I'm not doing that anymore. And that keeps you driving forward and hopefully reaching out and helping other people along the way too. So
ideally, but this is interesting because I just talked with a friend about this. Right now, we can use this. We're kind of doing a public service type thing. We're talking about,
it is mental health awareness month.
Yeah. Yeah. This is Luke Sando passed. We know kind of what, we don't know the details. We know.
I did an interview with him 6 days ahead of time. I think I was the last interview that he did, other than his podcast with Fuad,
Right.
Such a great guy. He was a great guy.
And there was a competitor, I think she lives in Massachusetts. She had won one of Jay Cutler's shows. She committed suicide. So a lot of people are struggling really, really badly with this. They're like, if you took, for instance, in my family, if you have, the kids will take on different roles as they're growing up. Mm-hmm. You could take two people and they're in the same family, everything else is the same, and one would not utter a peep and the other one's just crying bloody murder like it's the worst thing ever.
Right.
And that's just, oftentimes it could just be a function of the circumstances. I'm very used to having sort of an isolated life, and it's made me quite lonely in the past because I've been doing online stuff for so long.
Yeah.
And I tend to travel a lot and various other things. So people say, how you doing? I'm like, I'm okay. Like, this isn't any more isolation than I'm used to. I've been doing this for years now, so I'm okay.
Normal life.
But that doesn't say what?
This is my normal life. I'm doing great.
Yeah. But some people, some people are really hurting right now. Mm-hmm. And when the thing happened with Luke, I actually just called and contacted some people who I knew could be struggling with some things, because no one knew, like, okay, this is the day Luke's going to do it, or this is the day with this this competitor. Maybe she was a figure competitor. I can't remember. I don't remember her name.
Yeah, I think she was figure.
Yeah. But, you know, if anyone could have seen and known with any certainty, they would have done something to try to stop that, I think. So there are all sorts of people who are hurting in various ways, and that's okay. Reach out to them. If there's anyone listens to this and says, you know what, here's another thought that I just had, is that like down here in Tampa, the gyms are opening now.
Yeah.
I hear the Powerhouse was crazy. I guess people went in there at midnight or 12:01 and
they opened Sunday night at 12:01. I've been going in at my normal times, like around noon, but
yeah,
today's an off day anyway, so that's
okay.
the only
reason. Is it normal? I haven't been into the gym yet because I didn't have time the other day.
You know what? It's been fine. Like,
okay.
Powerhouse, you know, especially the athletic club, the capacity is like 800 people, and they,
right,
you know, half capacity. They're never going to have 400 people in there at one time.
Okay,
it's so spaced out. But honestly, everybody's normal. Like, people are being polite and respectful. Nobody's like trying to pile on each other or anything.
Right.
They're wiping stuff down. They're wiping the handles on the dumbbells. Like, everybody's just normal. It's like,
here's the thing.
To be back.
Yeah, but here's the thing that I was thinking of, is that in places like New York, California, or some states, they're not. So it sucked. We had like, as of, you know, I think they opened things in Georgia a couple of weeks ago, but everyone was sort of had this cohesive, we're all kind of suffering with this together, you know, and the memes apply to everyone. No one gets to do anything. We're all kind of like, this sucks for the whole of the U.S.
Right.
And now some people are getting to go train, and I haven't seen, but I've heard like some people are like, woo, I'm at the gym, and they're all happy about it. And then other people are still in Shitsville.
Yeah.
And that can be, that's another level of like, we need to be considerate of those who are still hurting. It's like, you know, just because you leave the hospital and you're free to go, there are people that you may have seen in there that are still sick. Right. Yeah. These people are still stuck in isolation. So we need to consider that, I think. And
absolutely. And I've tried to be, because I'll post highlights from my training session that day, but I use it all as like education. So like, you know, I'll type like, this is what went wrong with this exercise. This is what you should be doing, or, you know, whatever it is, to try to teach it. But it's tough because you are excited yourself to be back in the gym and training. And especially being a coach and wanting to educate people, I want to show people things to help educate them, but you do have to be very, very aware and cautious that there's a lot of people, over half the country and pretty much the whole world, that still cannot get in and do what you are doing, what they love also.
Right.
It's tough because, I mean, with my clients, I've probably got a little over a third of them that are maybe, you know, back to their gym is open, and I've got a good majority of them that aren't. And it's like you go from one client check-in and you're telling them strategies, how to ease back into the gym this week and get into things. Then you go to the next client, and it's like you're playing psychologist because they're just distraught about still not being able to be in the gym. And it's like bouncing from one back to the other. And it's something that, you know, I didn't think about it the way that you said it, though, is that it was unifying us all. Like, we were all miserable. And now it's like, you see a few people hitting that lottery, you know, a few people hit the jackpot, and they're back in doing what they love while everybody else is still struggling. And it's, I don't know. It's unfair. I don't know what the right answer is. I really don't.
I think we can just say, hey, brother, sister, I know it sucks. You'll be out of this eventually soon. You'll be on this side of the fence, you know, and I just know you're there. And I wish you were here. Like, you can say that. It's like, I wish you were with me, in that I haven't been to the gym. Actually, I just didn't have enough time. I just trained at my house on the last training session. I probably will do that again, like this week too, just because I would do that anyway, depending on what the circumstances were. But just recognizing that those people are there, and just like, you know, like not be like, woohoo, I got it, you know, like just leaving them behind. That's what that feeling of being abandoned, which people can have, or not sensing empathy. The whole thing, I think that, you know, the biggest lesson we can get from a lot of what's happened is to start recognizing when people have, you know, maybe left this world, as they're no longer alive, or you have to kind of pay attention. Our tribe is it's the whole world. It's everybody. And those people who are in New York, and I have friends there, and you have clients in areas where they can't, they're all like, they're part of our family. It's like, It's like, just because like you're having a family reunion and half of them made it to the, the island where you're going to have this huge vacation, the other ones are still stuck because their flights got delayed. They're still your family. So you're still talking to them on the phone. You're like, I can't wait till you get here. Just to know that we care about those people. And we got to take that lesson and keep on applying it when the pressure cooker's off for everyone, especially when the pressure cooker is still on for some people because they're, stuck at home. And just know it's like, hey, I know that sucks. So I'm going to probably start still doing stuff, keep doing stuff in my backyard, because people like those exercises.
Well, this is really maybe honestly, it was around January, all last year, but around January, I was really going to pull the trigger and just start building my garage gym. And we just bought a new house last year, and we had a few things I had to get, and expenses came up, and I'm like, I don't need the gym right now. Like, we'll do this, we'll take care of this, and I'll do it later. And then like 2 months later, COVID hit, and I'm like, shit. But now like this is one thing that I never thought in my wildest dreams something would come along and take my gym away from me. Like, what could happen that they would close the gym, they would close everything, right? It just never really crossed my mind. Well, now we know it's a real possibility that it could happen again. And so I'm really looking into it now again, is to hopefully by the end of the year have enough that I can outfit a garage gym so that I don't ever have to worry about this again. I went through the 2 months with just resistance bands, and it worked for a while, but about 2 weeks ago I snapped them both, and I was just kind of like makeshifting my workouts for the last 2 weeks until the gym opened this week. And
bungee cords.
Oh, I never thought about that. That's a good one.
I put a video out. I just took bungee cords, and they don't weather quite as well, but you just have to connect them, enough of them. I have the full explanation. We'll go back to the muscle physiology thing, but you've got a link tension association with those bungee cords. So let's say the range of motion for your exercise is like a yard. So you can do like a side lateral like this, something like that. So if you just use one bungee cord, literally you go from unstretched to stretch, and it only gives you that much range of motion, but you need 3 times as much. Well, you hook 3 bungee cords in series, and now you got, something that's close to a good loading curve through the effective real life range of motion, which is, a yard.
You're right.
My hands, I think I'm outside of the camera, and then you've just used, and I don't think there's a shortage of bungee cords. I think you can get those still at the hardware stores. And those sorts of things.
I don't think anybody's caught on to that little trick, Scott. So I think that's
that's why I put that out. I got bungee cords all over the place, and you could use. So anyone who's listening and they can't get banned, bungee cords can be used, and they actually work pretty well.
Hey, it's like the all-around universal tool right there.
Yeah, I know. Like, I'm going to have to do something with duct tape. I'll have to figure that out.
Yeah.
I'll end this with a funny story about duct tape, because then we run way over. But there was but people, blood flow restriction was pretty big. A lot of people were trying to figure out how to do that. And before you could buy some of these BFR tools, I haven't heard of any really good ones that you can get on. At least I have someone gave me that aren't bad. They're actually manometers. They're actually like, sphygmomanometers, the blood pressure cuffs that have been modified. But this particular kid was trying to do that, and he didn't have knee wraps, I guess, at the time, and he wanted to make it really hardcore. So, and he admitted, which is really funny because he's just an open book, that he was trying to impress one of the women who worked behind the desk at the gym where he was. So he's going to train legs. He's going to do some BFR, and all he had was some duct tape. So he strapped himself up with duct tape, like really high up, and did his set, and then he couldn't get it off. He couldn't find the edge of the duct tape. So he finished this, he was done like the 30, 15, 15, 15, like the standard like protocol that's been used. And then he was screwed. And so he had to like get up in that condition and wobble across. And the closest person was the woman who was trying to impress. And I don't think she was impressed. She probably got a kick out of it.
I was going to say, I hope he at least got like a number or a date out of it or something.
Maybe she might have like, this guy is actually a lot of fun to be around. Like, I'll entertain him for at least one date, I'll have a good story out of it. But so don't use duct tape if you're trying to do BFR. Be careful with that.
Yeah, I've heard people taking like their knee wraps or their wrist wraps or something and trying to wrap it around like a makeshift BFR cuff and everything.
Yeah.
But I I don't really do BFR that much anymore. I did years ago, but I had just like a cheap little pair. I think I got it off like bodybuilding.com or something, you know.
Is it blue? Yeah, with a little, yeah, those are awful.
Oh, they snapped they snapped and
Terrible.
It was a mess. So, well, Dr. Scott, thank you again. I really appreciate it. Why don't you tell people where they can find you and about your bodybuilding, how to be your own bodybuilding coach book?
You can, if you just type in Scott Stevenson bodybuilding, it comes up. It's drscottstevenson.com. Fortitude training is the training system. And if you go to BYOBB coach, so be your own bodybuilding coach.com, you'll get there. But all the links in the website, all the URLs go to the same place. You can all find it in one spot.
Gotcha. And I'm going to leave everything in the description box below for you guys to make it really easy for you. But thank you again. Definitely looking forward. We're going to have you on again soon and pick one of the 10 or 20 different topics that we wanted to go on a rant about, talk a little bit more. But take care. We'll have to meet up soon. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So take care, everyone.
Yes.
Stay safe. Talk to a friend in need if you need to.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.